People have actually been forgetting to tell you this apart from the speakers today. Methane emissions per kg of production from resilient pastures are lower. This is simply because resilient pastures are greener for longer. Greenness increases digestibility. As Ed explained, digestibility is a cornerstone of methane reduction. Healthier plants and healthier soil promote longer greenness. The second source of longer greenness is deep-rooted shrubs. They supply protein to supplement dry grasses. Shrubs improve the carbon-nitrogen ratio of the total diet. So it's not the shrubs in isolation, it's the fact they leverage up the total diet. This is a graph of what cattle ate up in Alice Springs. Now, it's not a methane graph, but actually when you look at it, it really explains all the principles behind methane reduction. This is the one line I want you to follow. It's the amount of green grass. Now, I want to explain it. This is what the cattle were actually eating. So if you go from top to bottom, you'll see what was in their diet. Now, as the season deteriorated, you'll notice that they started to include more dry grass in their diet. So this was whatever green grass they could find, dry grass. But when you get to the very top, you'll notice that as the greenness went out of the grass, the shrubs kicked in to get that carbon-nitrogen ratio I referred to. Now, the interesting thing was that as you follow this green round, there must have been a bit of a storm, because obviously there's a bit more green grass available. When you look upstairs, the cattle immediately dropped a lot of the shrubs out of their diet. The season went off again, what happened? They came in. So just think of that as a tactic for reducing methane emissions. The quality of plants in a resilient pasture is usually higher than in a degraded pasture. Again, this results in higher digestibility. Animal reproduction rates with resilient pastures are higher due to higher body weight of breeders. This reduces methane emissions as fewer breeders are needed to produce the same number of offspring. Resilient landscapes that are well managed, and I'm heading just quickly into Tony's little section now. Resilient landscapes that are well managed have higher carbon inflows than degraded landscapes. This has a positive influence on soil carbon levels. During extreme weather events, remember that wind and that saltbush plant, during extreme weather events, resilient pastures are less likely to lose soil carbon due to wind and erosion, water erosion. This is just an image that's sitting in the poster outside. I won't go into any details because it's there, but all the information. So in conclusion, the only time that you can increase resilience is when it rains. When it rains is when the carbon arrives from the atmosphere via photosynthesis and is transferred into the bottom half of plants and the soil. And so thank you very much.
I quite like your idea. I quite like your idea of managing carbon as opposed to managing grass. Now we have time to ask some questions of Alan around the idea of strategies to address climate change. So do we have someone who'd like to start us off with a question for Alan? Kelsey?
Thank you for coming, and it's very interesting, your work. My question is, where do we put the breeders?
That's a very good question. If you've got the handout, that actually the reason I sent that up was you can't sell them. You've got to make it quid. You've got a bank manager like everybody else. Back in the mid-90s, actually how I got tied up with the scientific community, because the federal government was aware that I was promoting saltbush as a resting tool, and so it was a paradigm shift. The CSIRO then coined the phrase using saltbush in the mud, not the dust. What they picked up on was that because saltbush was frost resistant, drought resistant, and not eaten by kangaroos, it was somewhere to put the animals at the end of a dry spell. And so what my research project was all about was to get animal performance out of get animal performance from saltbush, because the perception was it was no good. And people weren't going to use it as a resting tool if the animals weren't going to do any good. But what the core message was is that it was a way of resting the pastures without selling them. And in that handout you've got, I talk about double stocking. There's all different processes I actually talk about how that you can actually do it.
Yeah, it was very good. I enjoyed it, thank you.
Oh, thanks.
But I would love to get some copies of that photograph about the with the two crows with their dinner things and the fat cow on one side. If we could have some of those at the barbecue later, that'd be wonderful.
Well, it tickled my fancy, yeah. I actually put another publication out and put it on the front cover of it, and before I even knew the word carbon. And I was going up in a lift in Brisbane to my mother, and there was just two city people there. And I said, "What do you get out of this photo?" They said, "Obviously you can do something, can't you?" So you don't have to be a country person to understand that photo. And I love the two crows sitting there with their bibs on. That really made my day.
Thank you.
It did look suspiciously like a sheep though, Alan.
Oh yeah. But it wasn't a New Zealand sheep.
Okay, somebody else with a question or a comment for Alan?
Thanks very much, Alan. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You said earlier on your speech that you've got to have ground cover to encourage rain, keeps it cool. But when I pulled my country at home about 7 or 8 years ago...
Bill, just like this one.
Yeah, when I pulled my country 7 or 8 years ago home, I hadn't been getting much rain, but since then I've got a hell of a lot more rain at home in the last 5 years than I had in the last 40 years before then. Can you explain that? Because there's not really so many trees there now, but gee, I've got some grass.
What have your neighbours done, first up, just out of interest, around you?
Well, they took a lot of bare ground.
So there's a different answer to what you're expecting. If they've got bare ground, and I know because I did speak to you earlier that your country is regenerating, what you've actually done is you've changed the whole energy flows of your landscape. And it's, as I understand, remember, I'm just starting to get on top of this debate now, so if, there could be some things I say that aren't right, and I apologise for that. But my understanding is that you're getting different flows coming off the landscape depending on the ground cover. And I had tea one night with Bob Layton, he was one of the guys the Queensland government brought up. And we got talking about these things, and I said to him, well, in the outback, when the droughts are on, you see all those whirlywinds racing around everywhere. That's hot air just going up. And then he started talking about the impact of when the landscape becomes bare. And he started to draw the analogy between a degraded landscape and highs. And he said, you all know you don't get rain from highs. And so, coming back to your question, and the fact that energy flows determine how clouds are formed, when that rain event is wandering around, if there's only one little part of the landscape that's got a bit of cover on it, I'm referring to the person who gets the first storm. My understanding is the reason they get the second one is that that's the most favourable part of the whole landscape. And so I suspect, without knowing, it might have nothing whatsoever to do with you clearing trees. It might be the pasture management after the trees that gave you an unfair advantage over your neighbours. So you're damn lucky they haven't come.
Thanks very much, Alan. And it might explain some of the times you hear people say, well, once the storm sets up a path, they tend to follow paths early in the season. Someone else with a question for Alan? I'm sure it can't be far off. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, I'm going to go to our panel discussion.